What would you do if you saw a police officer roughing up a 70-year-old woman in broad daylight? Most people would freeze, but not this man. In the middle of a busy park, Mike Tyson, yes, the legendary boxing champion, saw something that made his blood boil. What happened next shocked the entire crowd, and it's all caught on camera. This is the moment Mike Tyson became a real-life hero. "Stop right there." The voice was loud, commanding, and sharp enough to cut through the warm afternoon air. It echoed across the open green space, bouncing off the park's walking paths and the tall, leafy oak trees. In an instant, the peaceful hum of laughter, birdsong, and distant chatter was broken. Dozens of heads turned toward the sound. Parents paused mid-conversation, joggers slowed to a cautious walk, and children stopped their games to stare at the unfolding scene. Beneath the sprawling shade of a massive oak, an elderly woman stumbled backward. Her body wavered like a branch in the wind, the grocery bag in her hand swinging awkwardly as she tried to regain balance. Inside the bag, a few apples tumbled against each other with a dull thud, one rolling out and landing in the soft grass. Her short gray hair fluttered in the breeze, framing a face lined with years of life's struggles, but right now, those lines deepened with confusion and fear. In front of her stood a uniformed police officer, his posture rigid, his jaw tight. Without a moment's hesitation, he reached forward and grabbed her by both arms. His grip was firm, too firm for someone so frail. Gasps rippled through the park. The woman's voice broke the silence, trembling and small. "I didn't do anything." Her words hung in the air, thin and fragile. They should have softened the moment, maybe even stopped it, but they didn't. The officer's fingers dug in tighter. His face twisted, brows furrowed in irritation, as though her words were just noise to him. Around them, the whispers began. "What's happening? Why is he grabbing her like that? Is she in trouble?" Some people instinctively reached for their phones, cameras clicking on, video recording apps opening. A young man in a baseball cap crouched to get a clear angle, his hand shaking slightly. A mother shielded her little girl's eyes, muttering, "Don't look, honey." The tension was thick enough to taste. The woman tried to twist free, but her strength was no match for the officer's hold. Her grocery bag dangled awkwardly, the fabric stretched from the pull. Another apple slipped out, rolling toward the walking path. A small boy ran to pick it up, but his father quickly pulled him back, murmuring something about staying away. It was the kind of scene that made you want to believe there was some misunderstanding, that maybe the officer was helping her. But the sharpness in his grip and the strain in her voice told a different story. And then, there was the feeling. The kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. The kind of moment where you just know something bigger is about to happen. Because not far away, just a few feet from the scene, stood a man watching. Not just any man. His frame was massive, his muscles visible even beneath his sleeveless black shirt. His shaved head caught the sunlight, his stance wide, his gaze locked on the officer and the woman. He didn't blink. He didn't fidget. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen injustice before, and didn't intend to watch it happen again without stepping in. A couple nearby noticed him. The man whispered, "Wait, is that?" But he didn't finish the sentence. The officer, still gripping the woman, barked something under his breath that only she could hear. She winced, her face tightening in pain. That was when the large man's expression changed. His jaw tightened, his chest rose, and his hands curled slightly into fists at his sides. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Camera lenses zoomed in. The air in the park felt electric, as though everyone knew they were seconds away from something they'd never forget. Because that someone very familiar wasn't just watching for curiosity's sake. He was deciding exactly when to step forward, and when he did, everything about this scene would change forever. Mike Tyson had been in the park for barely 20 minutes. It was one of his rare days off from training, and he decided to enjoy the fresh air, letting his mind drift as he did an easy jog along the path. His black sleeveless shirt clung to his frame from the sweat, his powerful arms glistening under the afternoon sun. For most people, a run in the park meant escaping from stress. For Mike, it was a way to stay grounded, to keep the old ghosts of his life in check. He had fought battles in the ring and battles outside it, but nothing in his life had prepared him for what he was about to witness. He had just slowed to a walk, grabbing his water bottle, when he heard the voice, sharp, aggressive, the kind of tone that doesn't belong in a peaceful park. He turned toward the sound and saw it, a police officer gripping a small, elderly woman like she was a dangerous criminal. Mike's first reaction wasn't confusion. It was anger. From where he stood, he could see the fear in the woman's eyes, the way her body shook, the way her hand clutched her grocery bag like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her knees wobbled with every movement, and Mike could tell she was seconds away from collapsing. Without thinking, he started walking toward them. "Hey!" His voice boomed across the grass. Heads turned again, and the people closest to the scene stepped back slightly. There was something about the way Mike's voice carried, deep, commanding, not aggressive yet impossible to ignore. The officer turned his head, his grip still locked on the woman. Recognition flickered in his eyes. His brows pulled together, as if trying to decide whether this was going to make his job easier, or much harder. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to stay back," the officer said sharply. "This is police business." Mike's pace didn't slow. His dark eyes locked on the woman, not the officer. "Police business? She's an old lady. She looks terrified." The officer's jaw tightened. She was resisting. Resisting what? Mike cut in, his voice low but dangerous. "A free walk in the park? Carrying groceries?" The woman's voice cracked as she looked at him. "Please, help me." It was all Mike needed to hear. He stopped a few feet away, his massive frame casting a shadow over both of them. His presence was like a wall, solid, unshakable, impossible to ignore. Around them, the crowd thickened. Someone whispered, "That's Mike Tyson." Another person pulled their phone higher, zooming in, the red recording dot blinking. Mike's voice dropped, quieter but heavier with authority. "Let her go." The officer hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. "Sir, I'm telling you." Mike took another step forward, his muscles tense, every inch of him radiating controlled strength. "I don't care what you're telling me. Let her go." It wasn't just the words, it was the weight behind them. The crowd could feel it. The officer could feel it. This wasn't just a man talking, this was a man ready to act if things didn't change fast. The woman looked between them, her chest rising and falling rapidly, as though every breath was a battle. A teenage boy in the crowd shouted, "Come on, man. Let her go." That triggered a ripple of voices. "Yeah, what's your problem? She's not hurting anyone. We saw everything." Mike glanced briefly at the people. "Keep recording," he told them. "Don't stop until she's safe." That was the moment the officer realized he wasn't just dealing with an onlooker, he was dealing with a force of nature. And the longer he kept holding on to that old woman, the worse this was going to get for him. Mike didn't raise his voice again. He didn't need to. His stance, his size, his reputation, they spoke louder than any yell could. The air in the park shifted. People leaned forward, waiting to see what would happen next. And Mike? He was ready for whatever came, because one thing was certain, no one was going to hurt this woman while he was standing there. By now, the park no longer felt like a place for quiet walks and friendly conversations. It felt like a stage, and everyone was watching. People who had been sitting on benches moments ago were now standing, phones held high. Joggers stopped mid-stride, earbuds dangling, eyes locked on the unfolding drama. Even parents who had been playing with their kids were frozen in place, torn between shielding their children's eyes and witnessing what felt like an inevitable clash. The murmurs grew louder with every passing second. "Is that Mike Tyson?" someone whispered, disbelief in their voice. "It is. That's him. Oh man, this is about to get crazy." But Mike wasn't here for fame, and he certainly wasn't here for crazy. His focus stayed locked on the officer and the trembling woman in his grip. "Sir, I've told you to back off," the officer said, his tone louder now, not because he was in control, but because he could feel control slipping away. The presence of a growing crowd, the cameras pointed directly at him, and the imposing figure of Mike Tyson standing just feet away were all squeezing him into a corner. Mike stepped forward again, slow but deliberate. "You've been told by her, and now by me, to let go. This is your last chance before you make things a lot worse for yourself." The officer's eyes flicked to the crowd. Dozens of red recording lights glowed back at him. He shifted his stance but still didn't release the woman. That hesitation was like throwing gasoline on a fire. The crowd's voices became sharper, more unified. "Let her go. She's done nothing wrong. You can't just grab people like that." A woman in the crowd, about the same age as the one being held, cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "She's my neighbor. I just saw her buying groceries 5 minutes ago." Another man added, "She's harmless. You're out of line." The officer barked back. She was acting suspiciously and refused to comply. Mike raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious? She's 70. Carrying apples. What exactly was she resisting, paying too much for groceries?" That sparked a wave of laughter from the crowd, not because it was funny, but because it hit a nerve. People were starting to see the absurdity of the situation, and the more they saw it, the less sympathy the officer had. The woman in the officer's grip winced again, her voice soft but desperate. "Please, please let me go." Mike crouched slightly so his eyes met hers. His voice softened. "Ma'am, I'm right here. You're gonna be okay. I promise." Then, turning back to the officer, his voice hardened again. "You're done holding her. Now." The officer's breathing quickened. The badge on his chest gleamed in the sunlight, but it might as well have been a spotlight, exposing every move he made. And Mike? He stood tall, unflinching, his arms slightly apart, his hands relaxed but ready. He didn't need to ball them into fists for everyone to know what would happen if things escalated. The crowd had now formed a wide semicircle around them, blocking the officer's easy escape. Every angle was covered by a phone. Someone shouted, "We're live on Facebook." Another replied, "It's trending on TikTok already." The officer's grip loosened, just barely, but it was enough for the old woman to shift her weight. She looked like she might fall, but Mike instinctively took a half step forward, ready to catch her if she did. The standoff had reached its breaking point. The question now wasn't if the officer would let go. It was when, and whether he'd do it with dignity, or be forced into it by the force of the crowd, the cameras, and the living legend standing in front of him. Mike could feel the weight of the moment pressing on everyone in that park. The officer's grip on the woman was no longer the confident hold of someone enforcing the law, it was the tight, jittery grasp of a man realizing he was standing on thin ice. "Listen to me," Mike said, his voice steady but commanding. "I've been here long enough to know exactly what happened. That woman's been minding her own business. She's not threatening anyone. She's not committing a crime. She was walking slowly with her groceries, and you grabbed her." The officer's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, you don't have the full story." "Oh, I've got the story," Mike replied, taking a small step closer. "And so do they." He motioned toward the crowd, dozens of phones pointed directly at them. "Every second you've been holding her is recorded. There's no hiding from the truth now." From somewhere in the crowd, a man in a baseball cap called out, "We all saw it. She didn't do a thing." Another voice chimed in, "Yeah, she was feeding the ducks earlier. That's all." The woman in the officer's grasp winced as his fingers tightened again. "I told him I was just walking home," she said softly, her voice trembling but clear enough for those nearby to hear. "He said I was acting suspicious because I didn't answer fast enough when he called out." Mike's eyes narrowed. "Suspicious because she didn't hear you clearly? She's 70 years old. That's not suspicious, that's called being human." The officer's face reddened, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His eyes darted between Mike and the sea of recording devices. He could feel the tide turning, the control slipping completely out of his hands. Then, over the murmur of the crowd, a new voice cut through. What's going on here? A second police officer appeared, walking briskly toward the scene. He was younger, calmer, and his eyes immediately scanned the situation: the old woman's frightened face, Mike Tyson's towering frame, and the growing, restless crowd. "Officer, release her," the newcomer said firmly. The first officer's head snapped toward him. She was resisting. "No," the second officer interrupted, "she's not resisting now, and from the look of things, she never was." The crowd erupted in agreement, voices overlapping. "That's right. She's innocent. Let her go." Mike stepped slightly to the side, giving the second officer space to approach. "Glad you're here," Mike said. "This has gone far enough." The second officer nodded, his tone respectful. "Sir, I understand. We'll handle it from here." Then, turning to his colleague, he repeated with more authority, "Release her. Now." Finally, with clear reluctance, the first officer let go. His hands dropped to his sides, and the elderly woman stumbled forward. Mike moved instantly, his strong arm catching her before she could fall. "You're all right now," he said softly, guiding her a few steps away from the officer. She clung to his forearm, her breathing unsteady, her grocery bag swinging gently from her other hand. "Thank you. I thought no one would help me," she whispered. "You're never alone when good people are around," Mike replied, his voice low enough for her but loud enough for the crowd to hear. The second officer quietly asked the first to step aside. He began speaking to the witnesses, listening to their accounts, while the first officer stood rigid, avoiding eye contact with anyone. The truth had become painfully clear: the elderly woman had been stopped without valid reason, accused without cause, and treated with unnecessary force. And without Mike Tyson stepping in, it might have gone much further. Phones were still recording, but now they were capturing something different: a moment of relief, of justice being restored in real time. And while the officer's actions would soon be under review, the image that would travel the fastest across social media wasn't of him holding the woman, it was of Mike Tyson standing protectively by her side. The tension in the park began to fade, replaced by a cautious calm. People who had been holding their breath now exhaled slowly, relieved that the old woman was free. The officer who had grabbed her kept his distance, his eyes fixed on the ground, while the second officer continued speaking quietly with witnesses. Mike Tyson remained by the woman's side, one hand resting gently on her shoulder. She was still trembling slightly, but the fear in her eyes was slowly giving way to relief. "You okay to stand here for a minute?" Mike asked softly. She nodded, clutching her grocery bag tighter. "I'm all right, now. But I've never been so scared in my life." Mike's jaw tightened. "Nobody should ever make you feel like that. Especially not someone wearing a badge." The crowd around them had not dispersed. In fact, more people had gathered, drawn by the story that was unfolding. Phones were still pointed at Mike, but now they weren't just capturing the confrontation, they were capturing what came after. One man called out from the crowd, "Mike, you're a hero, man." A woman added, "You just saved her life." Mike turned to face them, his expression serious. "I'm no hero," he said. "I'm just a person who didn't want to stand by and watch someone get hurt. You see something wrong, you speak up. That's how we make things better." He raised his voice slightly, speaking to everyone who could hear him, and to the thousands who would eventually see the footage online. "Listen, this isn't about me. This is about her. And it's about all the people out there who can't fight back. We've got to look out for them. We can't just walk past and pretend it's not happening." His words hung in the air, heavy and real. Even the children in the crowd seemed to understand the weight of what he was saying. The elderly woman looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You didn't have to stop, but you did. You cared." Mike smiled gently. "That's what we're supposed to do for each other. You'd do the same for me." The crowd erupted into applause, not the loud, chaotic cheering of a sports arena, but a warm, steady clap, the kind that comes from respect. Some people began stepping forward, offering the woman bottles of water, asking if she needed a ride home. The sense of community that had been born out of the confrontation was almost as powerful as the moment itself. The second officer approached Mike quietly. "Thank you for handling that without making it worse. We'll file the report and make sure she gets home safely." Mike nodded, his eyes still scanning the crowd. "Good. And make sure something like this doesn't happen to someone else." Before he left, Mike turned to the cameras one last time. "Remember this, strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how many people you can protect. And if you see someone in trouble, be their shield." The elderly woman slipped her hand into Mike's and gave it a gentle squeeze. "You'll always be my champion," she said with a faint smile. Mike chuckled softly. "I think you already were your own champion. I just showed up at the right time." With that, he walked her toward the edge of the park, the crowd parting like a guard of honor. People waved, some still filming, others simply watching the unlikely but unforgettable pair, the world-famous boxer and the tiny, resilient woman he had defended. Later that night, the videos would go viral. Headlines would praise Mike Tyson's actions, calling him a hero, a protector, a man who stood up when it counted. But for Mike, it wasn't about headlines. It was about knowing that in a world where too many people stay silent, he had chosen to speak and act. Because sometimes the strongest punches aren't thrown in a ring. They're thrown in defense of someone who can't throw one back. And that's how one act of courage turned a terrifying moment into an unforgettable stand for what's right. If this story moved you, imagine how many more people we can reach together. So, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories. Your support helps these messages travel further and inspire more heroes.